Hi guys, and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to talk about holistic treatment of mast cell stuff. And by this, I mean an umbrella term for histamine intolerance, excessive histamine production, and mast cell activation disorders, and possibly things like mastocytosis. If you have something going on that involves the mast cells or histamine or both, this is the video for you. So stay put, and we are going to cover all you need to know about mast cells and how to really treat this from all angles holistically. First things first, we can't treat jack squat until we understand what's going on with it. So let's cover a little bit of a primer on immunology. Don't worry, I won't get too nerdy with you. Let's talk about the mast cells and their BFFs forever. So if you look here, I've got a resting mast cell. That is to say that all of its stuff is contained within the cell itself. So the histamine, the granules, all those little nuggets of stuff that we don't want to be released are still contained within the cells. And you're happy, the mast cells are happy, everybody's happy. And then stuff happens, which we're going to talk about, to trigger degranulation, where these little granules, these little nuggets of histamine and inflammatory mediators get out into the world, out into the tissue, and that's where you get the signs and symptoms of histamine intolerance. So here you have symptoms, here you do not. We don't even need to worry about it much more than that. We need to get these irritated, degranulated mast cells to a happier place so that they can go back to their resting state and they're not constantly bugging out. They don't think that they need to protect you from anything. So happy, not happy, happy, not happy. That's the first thing to know. The other thing is that no cell in the body acts alone. This is why modern medicine and conventional medicine sometimes gets things ass backwards, because they'll look at, say, thyroid hormone, but they won't look at it in relation to the gut or the brain or estrogen or anything else. So similarly, we can't hyper-focus all of our effort on the mast cells. We're going to lose track of what we need to do, and we're not going to see this as holistically as we need to. So within the immune system, there's about a gazillion different cells, but the ones that we're going to focus on the most are called Th2 cells. So that is T helper 2 and B cells. And these guys are all best friends forever. They are palling around. They're like the old gang. They just love hanging out together, and they will reinforce each other's activity as time goes on. So for example, these Th2 cells, when they become more activated and more overzealously enthused about their job for whatever reason, Th2 cells are going to make something called IL-4, and IL-4 is going to tell B cells that they need to make antibodies. So let's say IgE as an example, but there are others, other immunoglobulins or antibodies. And IL-4, the same chemical, is going to tell mast cells to do their mast cell thing. And it's going to get the mast cells primed and ready and raring for action so that when the antibodies also hit the mast cell, now the mast cell is seeing IL-4 from the Th2 cells, it's seeing IgE from the B cells, which then turn into plasma cells. That's like really nitpicky, but I needed you to know that. When the plasma cells, formerly B cells, make IgE or another antibody, the two come together and tell the mast cells, go bononkers, do your thing. We have a threat, Mayday red alert, you need to do your thing. And then the mast cells will degranulate. And also, here's the kicker, they will produce IL-4, the same exact chemical. So now IL-4 will go back up and it will tell the Th2 cell, hey, we like that IL-4, keep making it, buddy. And now this cell is going to make more IL-4, and now we're really in a reinforcing loop. And then similarly, the IL-4 is going to come back up here, tell the B cells, hey, we really dig all those antibodies you're producing. We want you to make more antibodies to stuff. And the plasma cells will oblige. And now you have two reinforcing loops, both involving IL-4, where the mast cells are degranulating and their activity is reinforcing these guys. And then these guys probably started the party to begin with. And now the immune system is all out of balance and bononkers. The other piece of the immunology part of the puzzle that I need you to understand, or you need to understand, it's not that I just want you to understand. The other thing that you need to know is that these Th2 cells are not the only T helper cells. They're not the only THs. There's another one that we will focus on a little bit called Th1, and these cells live on a seesaw. So you have a situation where Th2 cells will become more active, and then Th1 cells typically are going to be suppressed by their activity, again, because of IL-4. So we have chemistry that goes, all right, now we have more Th2 activity for whatever reason. We're going to suppress Th1 activity. So now we're going to be really imbalanced, and now we have these reinforcing loops coming from all directions. And this is why mast cell stuff and histamine intolerance can be so damn complicated, because people don't always realize that there's reinforcing loops. Yes, antihistamines can work. Yes, histamine dietary restriction can help, but you've got to break up some of the loops, and you have to figure out the things that are driving the process forward if you want to heal. So there's a couple of places where we need to intervene potentially, one of those being that big immune seesaw, which we'll cover next. Now, another therapeutic target that you can work on is trying to just prevent the degranulation. You can look for things that are known to degranulate mast cells and then try to cut it off at the pass so that now the mast cells don't get a chance to go that direction. Some of the really primo things that I've seen in research studies that I've noticed with my patients is lack of good quality sleep and stress. Those are huge, huge, freaking huge for mast cell degranulation. You can take antihistamines all day, every day. You can work on the immune seesaw, the B cells all day, every day. But if you are stressed out the wazoo, or if you're getting shitty sleep, it's going to be really tough to get out of this rut, because the mast cells are going to keep degranulating and they're going to keep pushing forward. And then they're still going to have that IL-4 production, and they're going to reinforce this loop. So two really key foundational, easier said than done things is stress management in whatever way is applicable and manageable for you, whether it be meditation, yoga, breath work, taking a vacation. I don't know, man. Like, do what you got to do to manage the stress as best as you can and make sure you're getting enough sleep. Now, that being said, we can try to block the degranulation and we can try to prevent it. There are also medications that are mast cell stabilizers, things that prevent the degranulation and try to get the mast cells back to their resting position. This is going to be things like cromulin sodium, where they can quiet down the mast cells and get them back to a resting position. But again, to the best of my knowledge at least, things like cromulin don't necessarily work on some of these other cells. It just prevents the mast cells from releasing histamine. And that's a worthwhile thing to do, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. So stress and sleep, absolutely huge. I will also note, and this becomes relevant with the Th1 thing too, is that toxicity broadly is going to push forward mast cell degranulation. I've seen some papers specific to, I believe, mercury and aluminum, but anything that could be toxic to the body, whether it be endocrine disruptors like BPA and phthalates, things like heavy metals or regular metals like aluminum, anything that could be toxic to the body, even heck, run with me here, stress and lack of sleep are toxic to the body, but in a different way. Anything toxic to the body, whether it's chemical or via lifestyle, is going to trigger the release of these mast cell granules, and then you're going to get the symptoms. Again, remember, symptoms, no symptoms. Symptoms, no symptoms. You want to be here, but if you're watching this video at this point, your mast cells are probably here. Let's face it, you wouldn't be watching this video if you didn't think this was happening. Now let's zoom in a little bit more on that Th1, Th2 seesaw that I mentioned before, where again, remember, Th2 cells are going to make that IL-4 and they're going to promote B cells so that they turn into plasma cells and make antibodies, and they're going to promote the degranulation of mast cells and release their contents. So we don't want these guys to be too active if we think that there's a mast cell or histamine problem going on. But this really is a seesaw where we want some baseline activity for both of them. Neither of these cells are truly good or bad. It's just that you want a bit of each and you want them in balance with each other. So here you are at a baseline, maybe at birth, and then for whatever reason, people can skew this way or this way, and both can be problematic. Now, I will say, as just a really quick primer, Th1 cells get blamed for autoimmunity when in fact they usually are not the cause of autoimmunity. There's another type of Th cell called Th17, and for many years we didn't know the difference between the two. So the Th17 cells were up to mischief and they were up to no good, Meanwhile, the Th1 cells got the blame. So if you have autoimmunity and we start talking about promotion of Th1 immunity, don't freak out. Actually, the vast majority of autoimmune patients, in my experience, tolerate these herbs very, very well. But let's say if you are histamine intolerant or you are suspicious that you are mast cell degranulated. Hold on, let me find my eraser. Let's redraw this seesaw to be more reflective of your situation. So rather than having some balance, let's say you are here. So here's your Th2 cells on the freaking moon, and here's your Th1 cells just barely hanging in there. And now we have more IL-4 production, more mast cell degranulation, and everybody's all perturbed. So what do? Well, you have two therapeutic interventions that are right here in front of us, and then there's actually a third that we're going to talk about in a minute. You could try to specifically inhibit or suppress the Th2 side of the immune system, and this would be done with things like natural antihistamines like quercetin and luteolin. The herb perilla leaf does this really nicely. Even things like reishi mushroom can do this somewhat nicely. So we could try to specifically inhibit the Th2 side of the immune system, and that is worthwhile for a lot of people. Or what I think is more readily available and will get you more mileage is you could try to promote Th1 immunity. And because they live on a seesaw with each other, if you push this side up, it's naturally going to bring this side down. Th1 boosters run the gamut, but these can be things like echinacea, most famously, possibly astragalus, although maybe not as strong as echinacea, and also berberine. So there's a lot of very widely available nutraceuticals that are very safe and very effective that can help bring up this Th1 side of the immune system. The other thing that I really, really like for this is glutathione. And we're going to talk about this in subsequent videos, but glutathione is needed as an antioxidant. It helps heal leaky gut. It helps protect your liver. It protects your brain. It helps you detoxify. It pulls compounds out of the tissues like nasty chemical toxins. It can chelate or pull things out of the tissue and put them back into circulation so that your liver can process them effectively. So it is a very, very talented molecule. It's also profoundly anti-inflammatory. One reason being is because glutathione promotes Th1 activity. So if you have any sort of toxic burden, which let's face it, we all do. I mean, heck, I'm even smelling this damn marker right now. I need to put a cap on this. But if you have any sort of toxicity burden or any sort of autoimmunity or leaky gut or brain inflammation, glutathione can be a multi-talented molecule that will help right the ship of your immune system and correct a possible deficiency, and also do other things like heal your gut and de-inflame your brain and de-inflame the rest of your immune system. So I really like and prefer supporting Th1 immunity 9 times out of 10. And then for my really progressed cases, I will usually layer in the Th2 inhibition. The third option, which is not depicted here yet, is that there is yet another type of T helper cell that would be called Th3 in research articles, but in human studies, they call them Treg cells or T regulatory cells. And these are T helper cells, but they are said to regulate and dampen the activity of all the others. So if we can promote their activity, we will automatically inhibit the excessive activity of either of these. So no matter if you are Th1 or Th2 skewed, you can get by doing this to great effect, and it's not going to be detrimental if you happen to push or pull the wrong side of the seesaw. My favorite Treg stimulators are going to be glutathione again. Hey, twofer, gotta love that. Also vitamin D and vitamin A, and to some extent other nutrients, and also things like turmeric and resveratrol. All of the antioxidant type supplements are usually going to have some effect on the Treg cells. But my favorites are glutathione, vitamin D, and vitamin A. So there you have the 3 angles. You could either boost up Th1, you could boost up Tregs, or you could inhibit the Th2 cells while you're doing the antihistamine stuff, while you're getting to the root causes, while you're working on the stress and the sleep and everything in between. You can work on this in conjunction with that, and then see where you need to be as far as your dietary histamine load and other stuff. Now, going back to those mast cells, speaking of which, if you have plenty of histamine being generated by your body, and then you also have a lot of histamine coming in your food, that's where perhaps lowering your dietary histamine can be useful and helpful. So things like tomatoes and tomato sauce, fermented foods, preserved foods, smoked, any sort of like kombucha and kefir, and anything with probiotics potentially could be like this. Certainly things like, again, tomatoes and the nightshades. Lowering the amount of those foods in your diet can be really helpful to a certain extent while you're juggling all of this stuff. But again, like root causal, if you have a massive glutathione deficiency because you've been exposed to mold or Lyme disease, or you have been living in a high stress situation, that's going to deplete your glutathione as well. If you have a vitamin D deficiency and you were unaware of that, or maybe you were aware of it and you just didn't manage it up until this point. If you were vitamin A deficient, these are the things that can really, really tank your immune system and make it really difficult to recover from histamine intolerance and mast cell stuff if you don't have all these ducks in order. So I think the biggest things to know is that yes, you can work on the mast cells directly, and you could do things like mast cell stabilizers and antihistamines, natural or pharmaceutical. They both work. They're just slightly different mechanisms. You could work on this immune seesaw and try to get the rest of the immune cells to cooperate and not go bonkers on you. And you can trace it back to the root causes, because even these guys didn't go bonkers for no reason. It's not like they just said, hey, let's mess with them and do this. These immune cells think that they're protecting you from something. So you don't want to just squash the heck out of them willy-nilly. You want to try to understand what triggered the immune dysfunction to begin with. Was it an excess of something bad? Was it a deficiency in something good? Or was it something like sleep and stress that is foundational to how your body works overall? But for whatever reason, your mast cells and your T helper cells are feeling threatened, and you need to look at this through that lens if you want to really get well and really treat this holistically and completely. I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you next time about high histamine foods and low histamine foods. So for those of you who do feel a need to modify your diet for histamine content, that's going to be a good couple of videos for you to tune in for as well. Hey guys, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, click the like button, and leave a comment down below with the videos that you would like to see me do next. Doing all of those really helps support the channel and support my efforts in making as many videos as possible for you guys. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.